Good morning. So, that gospel, something we're very familiar with, should kind of get you start thinking. Reminder, the very essence, the very core of our Christian message has two parts: faith and love. Faith, that is total trust in God and His message that comes through Jesus Christ in the New Testament. And love, as in the power that motivates our actions and our relationships. We cannot have one without the other. As the Apostle James says in his letter, faith without good works is dead. An example, the Pharisees often make clear that faith which does not express itself in love is not fulfilled. It was a common practice in those days for the rabbis and scholars at the time of Jesus to debate how their 613 rules and regulations could be summarized into a few that people could actually follow and understand. In that context, today's gospel has a scholar engaging Jesus in a test of his wits. But as he often does, Jesus replied to the challenger's question, "What must I do to inherit everlasting life?" with a question of his own. What is written in the law? How do you interpret it? The scholar's answer showed good knowledge of the commandments and the ability to articulate his beliefs quite eloquently. It prompted Jesus' reply, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But we all know that eternal life is unreachable through minimal engagement or pure knowledge. Action is required. So the repartee continues with Jesus responding to the "Who is my neighbor?" by telling the story of the Good Samaritan. Now you have to understand, Samaritans were Jews who had intermingled with pagans during the Babylonian exile. They had broke away and they did not practice the pure Mosaic law. Jewish leaders considered them traitors, despised them, and warned people to stay away from them. They were dangerous, they would rob you. So with the Good Samaritan parable, Jesus does what he often does. He just turns the common interpretation upside down. That helpless victim represented an opportunity for the passers-by to put God's laws into practice. The priest, who should have acted compassionately, was either afraid of being robbed or just didn't want to be inconvenienced, so he crosses to the other side of the street, he puts his blinders up, and he walks by. The Levite, a minister of the temple, viewed his call and his scheduling to be at the ritual service much more important than taking care of the victim. So he did the same thing. He crossed the street, put his blinders up, and just walked by and ignored the person. But a Samaritan, the least of any expected to connect the love of God with love of neighbor, responded with compassion. He showed the true meaning of praising God through service to others. The gospel tells us we have to forget about the moral condition of the one who was helped. It's totally irrelevant how he got there. Jesus doesn't care. Maybe he was traveling with too much money on a bad road, should have known better. Today, we might compare that to a drunk driver or a drug addict and forget our compassion. For Jesus, again, why the man was beaten and robbed was irrelevant. The point was he was in need. And in the story, that injured man, that complete stranger, he has a much higher priority than the needs of any of the three people we're introduced to. The first two are rushing off to the temple to serve God. But what they fail to realize is that a child of God is laying in their path, and they could serve God right then and there by doing something. Remember the words of Jesus, "As often as you do it to the least of my brothers, you do it for me." But only one of the three, that despised Samaritan outsider, responds to the one in need. He applies first aid, found shelter for the man, paid for his expenses. And the victim was probably a Jew. The key word is compassion. Compassion is not the same as pity. Pity suggests looking at the victim from a superior position. Compassion implies shared feelings, identifying with the pain and the suffering of others. Empathy, not just sympathy. Being sorry with, not sorry for. As the Jewish lawyer himself says, the neighbor is the one who showed mercy. He is she or someone who responds unconditionally to the needs of a brother or sister. A real neighbor in the gospel is one who can show real compassion to someone in need, unconditionally, without judging their background and who they are. You're in the gutter and you deserve to be there is not being neighborly. Why can't your own family or people help you is not being neighborly. I only have time for my family, I don't have time for you is not being neighborly. Love your neighbor as yourself is one arm of that very, very important commandment. So we have to ask ourselves, what is my criteria for helping someone in need? Do family, friends, race, religion, lifestyle come into the picture? This parable should touch all of our lives very deeply, calling us to honestly admit to ourselves, who is my neighbor? We can learn a great deal about who we are in trying to answer that question. The message is quite simple. We are called to love the people God places in our path and to do the best we can to be the best neighbor we can be.
Please like, subscribe, and comment below. God bless you.